Hi, it's been a while. A lot has gone on, let's just say, since probably my last YouTube videos, but I thought I'd make one because we need to talk. Through everything last year, when my niece went missing and I was pretty much working full-time on her case, as a distraction, I started working on my Ancestry.com tree and everything, and I look a little sick right now because I am. That's a whole nother issue with my mutations of my genes. So anyways, as a distraction, I decided to do the DNA test from Ancestry.com because I was just curious about my background. I knew about my mother's family mostly, coming from England. I knew about my grandmother's side, my mother's mother, who's Jewish, but I wasn't quite sure which line of the Jewish line, but I knew my great-grandparents were first cousins. I knew their parents were first cousins, so I was curious about the Ashkenazi, if we were Ashkenazi Jewish, because I know about all the health complications that do come from that, and that would explain a lot. Well, just inbreeding in general, of why, like, my grandmother's sister was mentally ill and had her own health issues. My grandmother had a lot of health issues. My mother is mentally ill and has a lot of health issues, so I just kind of needed to know. And also my father, who was raised to believe my father, I was always curious why I didn't look like him. I didn't look really like anyone in the family. Very sweet, nice family, very, pretty amazing, but I was always the black sheep's daughter, let's be honest. I was the black sheep's daughter. My father ended up homeless on the street for 20 plus years, self-medicating his schizophrenia with heroin and alcohol, but he was a wonderful artist, amazing artist. I have some of his paintings. But I was just curious, like, why didn't I look like him? Like, what part of me looks like my father? And boy, did I get my answer. So I took the DNA test back in May of 2018, so this last year, as a birthday present to myself. Got to spit in a little tube. Fun. Sent it off. Got my results back actually when I was in Costa Rica. And I remember looking, the Wi-Fi was kind of bad, so I was like kind of clicking through, looking at my breakdowns and trying to figure out, like, some things just didn't make sense. Like, yeah, I was a quarter Jewish. That made sense because my grandmother married non-Jewish. She was shunned from her family, and there was a big, like, uproar in the Jewish side that my grandmother married a blonde hair, blue eyes Englishman. And then she, immigrated to America to get away from her family, basically, because she was shunned. So I knew that, but I don't know. Some things just didn't make sense, and I saw the English, very strong English, kind of Latvian, because that made sense because my grandmother's family is originally from Latvia. They immigrated from Latvia to England in like 1919 or something, 18. So I knew that, but what was curious to me is my father, who was supposed to be my father, was Irish. Like, they're pretty much Irish, like related to the Kellogg's, kind of Irish. And I had like barely any Irish in me, so that was kind of my first clue. And then I started looking at the DNA matches. And the DNA matches, I could tell which ones were on my mother's side, sort of, because of the Jewish. So I could trace that. But then I noticed, like, a lot of the DNA matches in America were to the south. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense because my father's side was from Montana before they came to Washington State. And then I'm assuming all to the north because I think they came through in the Mayflower to, like, Massachusetts. So they stayed all north. But all my DNA matches were like Texas, Tennessee, like all the south. And I'm like, I don't know anyone there. So my first, like, close match was this girl, and it said close family to first cousin. So that means we're either siblings, half siblings, or first cousins. And I said, okay. That doesn't make any sense because my mother is an only child that I know of. And my father, well, I know all his sisters and his family, so who is this person? And I only have brothers. I have all 3 younger brothers. We're all half siblings. They have different dads. Well, 2 of them have the same dad, the oldest and the middle one, and the middle brother, his dad is their dad's brother, so they're also cousins. My mother's mentally ill, just keep that in mind. So yeah, a lot of things just didn't make sense. So I contacted this girl, her name was Jen, or is Jen, and she happened to just live right down the street from me here in Seattle, and I was like, okay. So we met in West Seattle at her place of work with her mother, and we thought, because we had talked a little bit before, we thought, oh, well, her mother is from England, and my mother, even though she was born here, she was sent back to England, because both my grandparents are from England. They didn't come here until the mid-50s. So I'm like, oh, we're related from England. That has to be it, right? But as soon as I walked in the door, I could tell her mom was just like, she just kept staring at me. And I was like, uh-oh. Because at first they thought maybe like her mother's brother could have been my dad. I don't know. We were like making up things. I was like, well, maybe my dad's father had an affair. And I was making all these crazy stories because, you know, my grandfather, his father was director of Seafair in the 70s. And, you know, he had some affairs like they did back then. And I thought, well, that could be possible. I don't know. Couldn't think of what it was. But her mother just kept staring at me and said, you know, you have the same cheekbones as my ex-husband. You have the same smile as my ex-husband. You have the same nose as my ex-husband. I was like, oh no, here we go. Keep in mind, in 1974, when I was conceived, my mother was only 17. So let that sink in for a bit. Plus it was the 70s, a lot of good, you know, drugs, a lot of good parties. I was conceived during Seafair, ironic. So yeah, obviously some really good parties. So yeah, we had both our mothers take the test because we were still thinking, okay, it might be the mother's side. Let's just ignore her mother's comments. So both mothers took the test. They came back. Of course, we weren't matched on the mother's side. My father had passed away in 2012 after, you know, many years of being homeless on the street here in Seattle and had cirrhosis of the liver. So he passed away, so I couldn't get him to do the test. She hadn't talked to her father since 2005 or something, a very long time. So we found him on Facebook, connected right away. He said he'd do the test. He did the test. Well, it took him 3 times to do the test. I think he was a little nervous because, come to find out, he's adopted. It gets better. So he was adopted in Texas, but his adopted family moved him to Washington State, up to Seattle and to Bellevue, where I was born in Bellevue, which is just outside Seattle. So yeah, I think he was nervous because he didn't know where he came from. He doesn't know who his parents are. He doesn't know anything. So he eventually took the test. So I matched with Jen back in June of 2018. He took the test. His test results finally came back in October of 2018. So we didn't find out that me and Jen were sisters until October. So a lot of like trying to figure this out until then. So yeah, when his test results came back, I sure enough looked on my phone. So my mother had already took the test, so she was there, and he pops up as my father. And I was like, I kind of knew because when Jen first showed me a picture when we first met of him younger years, maybe like in his 20s, I'm guessing, I kept staring at that photo like nonstop. I was like, that looks exactly like me, but with a beard, like, because he had this big, like, black beard, but the facial features, everything, I was like, that looks exactly like me. Like, I look like somebody else that's not on my mother's side. You know what I mean? I was just like, what the hell? So yeah, when his test came back, I was like, I knew it. I knew it. And you know, honestly, I always knew that I didn't belong to that, my Jones family, my dad's family. I mean, they were loving, caring people, loved them to death, but I never felt like I belonged. I felt like I just looked so different, and it was bad enough being the black sheep's daughter, but it was more than that. It was just like, I just didn't look like anyone, and it just bothered me ever since I was little. So now I had my answer, and boy, there's some awkward conversations. I talked to my aunts, and they were actually very accepting. Well, I've talked to 2 of them so far. I'm kind of working my way through everybody, but it's gonna take a while. So they were very caring and said, you know, we always kind of wondered why you didn't look like our brother. And I was like, yeah, me too, because I should have been like maybe taller and skinnier and thinner hair and longer face. Like, I should have just looked different. So yeah, it was interesting. And then I had to talk to my mother, and I couldn't get a hold of her like the first few days when his test first came back. And she actually found out on Facebook. She saw a post that my sister and new biological father had tagged me in. And I had tried to hide everything from my Facebook feed, but I guess I couldn't hide everything. And so somehow she saw it. And she was like, what? What is this? And I was like, this is why I keep trying to call you. You need to call me. And I didn't realize that when the test came back, it was the anniversary of my grandmother's death. So she was, you know, in that kind of state of mind. It was around October 6th. So I understand. And actually my great grandmother also passed away on that day, as well as my great grandfather. So October 6th. Yeah. But when she did finally come back and call me, she was like, no, those DNA tests are wrong. I know who your father is. Keep in mind also, on my birth certificate, it says father unknown. And I said, well, if you knew who my father was, why would you put unknown on my birth certificate? I mean, I know you were just 18, but why would you put unknown if you knew who it was? And she said, I don't believe this, but she said that back then you had to prove who the father was to put them on the birth certificates. And I'm like, DNA wasn't around. How would you prove who the father was? That didn't make sense. And I know my father, I mean, he has his own issues, drug issues and all that kind of stuff, but he didn't want me. He told my mother many times to get an abortion, you know, and her, you know, her mental health state wasn't the best, especially for us kids growing up. But, you know, I just kind of accepted that. That was my life. But yeah, there's not a whole lot I believe. So the other issue I have is, so both now my real biological father, who lives in Wyoming, and my mother have now talked, but they don't remember, must have been a really good party. They don't remember sleeping together, which is also kind of funny because, so he was adopted in Texas, right? And I guess around age 2, he got helped by the Shriners Hospital because he was born with a deformity in his leg, like twisted toes and something in his leg. I don't know. But he had to get his leg amputated, and so he had a wooden leg back then. Sorry. It is funny. So my mom basically slept with a seafarer pirate. I was like, Mom, how do you forget sleeping with a man with a wooden leg? I mean, wouldn't that kind of stick out? Pun intended. I mean, wood, friction, I don't know. But she's like, it's not funny. I'm like, oh, it's hilarious. It's like beyond funny. trust me, it's funny. At least I'm seeing the sense of humor in it. So yeah, that was an awkward conversation, and she argued, like, no, I know who your father is, like, the DNA test is wrong, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, science doesn't lie, Mom. You can't, no. And so I sent her a picture of my dad in his 20s. I'm guessing he was in his 20s. He was very handsome. He looked like Kevin Bacon. Like, every time I saw Kevin Bacon on the TV, on movies and stuff, I'd be, like, thinking of my dad, because he looked just like him. And then I showed her a picture of the one of this man who was in his 20s, the one that I look exactly like with a beard. So I sent her both of those pictures, and that pretty much shut her up, because it was plainly obvious to anyone seeing those side by side who I look like. Even if you just look at the, like, it's plainly obvious whose daughter I am. Like, it's that obvious. So I'm a perfect blend of my mother and this new biological father. But I definitely look a lot like him, like he did back then. I mean, he's aged since then, but identical. So yeah. And of course, you know, I've never had a good relationship with my mother. Very disconnected from her. A lot of mental health issues and mental and physical abuse. You know, in my childhood, I suffer from PTSD because of it. No fault of her own. Like, I'm not blaming her. That's just the way I grew up. She couldn't deal with everything that was going on with her, and she was projecting out, basically. And so I get that. I totally get that. Plus, she was young. You know, she had me barely 18. She had all 3 of my brothers. She also had a few abortions. So there was a lot going on. And so I get it. I totally get it. But it's still my life and my story. So people need to let me tell my story now. Because for almost 44 years, because I'll be 44 here on Cinco de Mayo, I've pretty much not talked. People used to comment that I didn't talk much. And I was like, yeah, because no one's going to understand what I have to say, and nobody listens. I mean, my mom used to scream at me. It's like talking to a wall. Well, yeah, because if I respond, I might get hit or thrown across the room or screamed at. So I learned from a very, very early age not to respond. When someone's going through major mood swings, I can't even talk, not to respond. You don't respond. Just take it. If they're going to hit you, hit you. If they're going to yell and scream. But if you talk back, it's going to be much, much worse. That's what I learned from a very early age. So, yeah, I've had a very tough life. And because of it, I'm a pretty tough girl. Like, I can take a lot of things. But what's been happening lately with everything, my niece situation, family situation, another niece, like, I have nieces and a nephew in foster care now, and just people not owning up to their own things, like drug addiction and neglecting of their kids and just not taking care of themselves. So if they can't take care of themselves, they certainly can't take care of their kids. And somehow people just want to blame me because I led a different life. I went on to just, look at me, I'm almost 44, even though I look like crap because I've been a lot of throwing up and stuff with the health mutation I have, so I have bags on my eyes, but still, look at me. I'll be 44 here in less than a month. So I've obviously taken care of myself as much as I can, but it's just, I don't know, I'm just kind of at my limit. I'm definitely at my limit right now. And just this added stuff, I'm kind of having an identity crisis as well, because now I'm like discovering this whole new family and like my new biological father and a new sister, and hearing about their stories, and like, you know, my sister has a lot of health issues kind of similar to mine, and my biological father, you know, he's discovering new family because he was adopted, and like we thought we found his birth father, but now I think it's who we thought was the birth father, his father is actually the birth father, but he's since passed on. So yeah, it's just like, it's a lot. It's a really, really a lot. And I don't know if other people are going through similar things, because now that these 23andMe and Ancestry.com tests are getting quite popular, I'm sure there's a lot of family secrets that are just coming out that people are discovering. And it's like, you can't hide anything anymore. Like, we're all going to find out. Science is going to tell us. So yeah, it's a lot. And I'm taking it the best I can with the sense of humor that I have. You know, because that's the British in me. If you're going through rough times, you fight through it, you make light of the situation, and you just push on through, you know? Because things could be worse. You could be dead. So, yeah, luckily I have that, and I've always been very strong, very independent. You know, I've been working since I was like 10 years old. Always had to do things myself because I had a single mother. Like, none of our fathers were really in our lives. I mean, the most father that was ever in our lives was to my brother's dad, but he was mostly in jail, and most of my childhood was visiting him in different prison and jail visitation rooms across Washington State. So that's where a lot of our childhood photos are from, visitation rooms of jails and prisons. So yeah, I've had a rough life. And I'm like, when does it stop? It's kind of where I am right now. And then the other thing is, you know, with DNA tests, which is great, is I've decided now to switch doctors, because doctors for years have not helped me. Western doctors do not help. All they want to do is prescribe drugs. And I'm highly like sensitive to chemicals and chemicals in my body. They just reject it. Like, even this, not just in my body, but even smells, like colognes will kill me. Colognes and perfumes kill me. Any strong scents, chemical scents, I have to do all natural stuff. So with the DNA test, I found a naturopath that would analyze my DNA raw data, which I thought was totally cool, because thank God I'm curious by nature, and just I've always wanted to know the truth about everything, because no one really was completely honest with me growing up. So I've always needed to know the truth. So finding a naturopath was amazing. And that's what I'm going through right now. And she found some mutations. One of the mother lode of mutations. Actually, the abbreviation looks like mother effer. But it's MTHFR. And if you start reading about this, it's like me. Like, everything I'm reading, it's me. Everything I'm going through right now, that's me. Like, and everything's inflamed right now because I'm under high amount of stress because everything that's going on with my family. Freaking court date coming up. You know, just one brother that does not want to admit to his addictions and his troubles. Because if he would just get help, he would be the most wonderful man in the world. He would be such a loving father. He'd be just amazing if he just admitted and got help. That's all his children want him to do, is just to get help. But no, instead he goes on the defense and tries to attack his sister. And like, yeah, it's a lot. Let's just put it that way. So everything in my body is just inflamed, and it's just acting up. It's malfunctioning left and right. I can't control my own body. I can't control it. And it's really frustrating. So I'm starting to change my diet. I have to get rid of, apparently folic acid is my enemy, as well as gluten, processed food, and sugars. So what is that? That's pretty much all of American food, is what they're telling me. I need to move to another country, which I have that in the plans too. Definitely in the next couple of years, I think I'll go. I don't want to live here anymore, because just going through this short amount of time, all the medical bills that are stacking up, and just what they prescribed me today was over $700. I didn't get half of those things. I was like, no, I can't afford that. And one thing that they prescribed me, the pharmacist wouldn't even give me. He goes, what are you allergic to again? And I was like, whatever the main ingredient in Aleve is, and also penicillin. And he's like, okay, what does the Aleve do to you? And I tell him, it basically gives me a stroke. And he's like, okay, I'm not giving you this. So the pharmacist knows what not to give me. And it's just like, it's really frustrating. And I'm really frustrated and just kind of done with everything right now. hence the video. But yeah, I'm going through a lot more than that. That was just the Cliff Notes version. So I don't know if anyone has any comments or like similar issues that they're going through, please share, because I'm all about hearing other people's stories and seeing how we can connect and like make a difference, because wow. Such a discovery at age 44, huh? It's a lot. So yeah, thank you for listening to me. I know this is probably long, but I'll make another video soon, and hopefully a few more with my new sister, and to tell our story, because it's pretty interesting. We do lead kind of similar lives through our childhoods. So yeah, stay tuned. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.